If you have a scary or unexplained story you want to hear on the channel, go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to send it my way. And of course, thank you. I don't know if I wasn't supposed to see what I did. Every post I see about it or YouTube video is taken down. About 6 months ago, I went into the forest with my friend. We walked through the pitch black darkness until we reached some steps to take us down to this clearing. At the bottom of the steps, there's a stream that cuts through two big rocks. On the right is brush surrounding a 5 to 10 foot deep tiny lake, maybe 30 foot big in each direction. As we approached the edge of the stairs that we walked down, when we reached almost 60% of the way, we both saw a blue light obscured by the brush. My first thought was that it might have been a headlight of a fisherman with one of those pulsing blue headlamp lights. That was until we saw it pulse and literally go through a tree. Like, literally phase through it as if it wasn't there. I told my friend to turn off his flashlight so whatever it was couldn't see us. My brain was trying to process what I was seeing due to the fact that nobody should be, or can, get into the forest at night. It slowly kept moving from the right side behind the brush to the left. As it got closer to the edge of the tiny lake where the rocks were, my body's fight or flight kicked in, anticipating that it was a person who wanted trouble. Then it happened. I saw it disappear and reappear on a path on top of the water, clear from the brush. I wiped my eyes, and my friend, stunned, looks at me and says, "What?" I shook my head and tried to refocus my eyes. Whatever this was only 10 feet away from me. It was a blue orb about the size of a softball. The color was the most beautiful blue, almost baby blue. It looked see-through, and as a full ball of light at the same time. As it kept on its path, it would slowly pulse. One bright pulse, and then it would vanish slowly. We both stood there watching it for at least a full minute, when I decided to leave. I didn't want whatever it was to get close to us. I didn't and couldn't believe what I was seeing, and I didn't know what kind of consequences would come from getting close. A side note, I forgot to mention that there was this background sound that seemed to be connected to whatever it was. It sounded like a loud all-around gust of wind, mixed with that sound you get before a tornado touches down. Finally, we got halfway up the stairs and turned around to watch it from a safe distance, maybe 20 feet away. My friend gets the bright idea to whistle at the orb without consulting me. Almost immediately, the orb starts pulsing as it was, but changing its trajectory toward us on the stairs. We let it get maybe 10 feet away from us, when I grabbed my friend and pulled him away to leave with me. I told him it's better off not finding out what it is or what it can do. We made our way up and out of the forest and left. About a week later, I told my stepbrother about it, and he didn't believe me, so we went back. We did the same trip through and saw nothing. Right at the end, before we exited the forest, there it was. Another just like it. This one was weird, though. I don't know why, but it almost seemed lost. There was no purpose to its movements, it was just going anywhere but in a straight line. If anyone has any questions, I'll answer them. And if you have ever seen or know about these, I'm dying to find out more about them. Especially because I can't find any information about them. This thing is not like one of those dust particles from a camera. My phone flashlight was off, and my phone was in my pocket. And we both saw it clear as day, lighting up the things around it. I plan to go back soon, and try and film these things. Thanks. I'm not sure if this event was supernatural in nature, but it was definitely one of the strangest things I have ever experienced. I was in my early 20s and had just moved from California to New Mexico. I was renting a small studio apartment and had a friend staying with me while he was between places. One night, my phone rang around 1 in the morning. I rarely wake up during the night, but on this night, woke readily. My phone read, "Unknown caller." Without thinking, I answered the phone. "Hello?" A soft feminine voice with a slight southern drawl responded asking, "Is this my first name and last name?" Stupidly, due to my grogginess, I answered, "Yes." The voice on the other end of the phone started speaking excitedly. "I have a divine opportunity for you. Absolutely divine. I'm going to give you a phone number to call first thing in the morning." I was just beginning to register how strange it was that this woman knew my name. "Wait, who is this?" I asked, growing increasingly startled. The woman laughed a little tinkling laugh and said, "Why, this is Miss Button. Quickly, get a pen and paper and write this down." She quickly rattled off a list of numbers, and I jotted them down on a pad of paper on my bedside table. I was starting to think more clearly and asked again, "Who are you, and how do you know my name?" She responded again, "This is Miss Button, with a divine opportunity for you." Then, the call cut off abruptly, and I was left sitting in the dark, just staring at my phone. There was nothing to do but go back to bed, so that's what I did. A few hours later, my friend and I both woke up. Just as I was wondering if it was all a dream, my friend asked me, "Who were you talking to last night?" I considered the possibility that I was sleep-talking, as this is something that I do sometimes, but one glance at my bedside table told me this wasn't the case. In red ink on the pad of paper on my bedside table, there was a phone number. I looked at the number, and sure enough, there was a record of the call having taken place around 1 in the morning. After recounting my experience to my friend, I called the unknown number back, only to get nothing but a dial tone. Next, I called the number on my bedside table. It rang for a while, but then a man answered. He told me that I had reached a Walmart in Akron, Ohio. I asked the man if there was a Ms. Button at that location, and he connected me to the manager to check. The manager told me there was nobody with the last name Button on their team, and she ended the call. To this day, I have no idea who Miss Button was, how she knew my name, or what divine opportunity she spoke of. Hey Raven, I love listening to your YouTube channel. No worries if you decide not to use my story, but it's an unexplainable event from my life, so I wanted to share it. I've had several strange experiences in my life that I wouldn't believe were possible if they hadn't happened to me. One such experience occurred when I was 6. That year, my dad decided to move our family. My older sister, my uncle, and myself from Vermont to Hopkinsville, Kentucky. We moved into an apartment in a renovated barn owned by my dad's friend, Dave. My dad and Dave had been good friends a decade earlier in high school when they partied together, but they hadn't seen each other in years. One memory my dad often mentioned from their teenage years was when they had tripped on acid together. That night, Dave had freaked out, screaming that my dad had a demon inside him. My dad speculated and joked that this experience was the turning point in Dave's life. Over the years, Dave had become straight edge and deeply religious, almost cult-like in his practices. while my dad still enjoyed partying frequently. Dave lived next door to us and was the pastor of a very active Southern Baptist church. He and his family were extremely religious and held daily church services. We attended sometimes to appease Dave, but didn't really subscribe to the religion or practices. Their practices were pretty extreme, with many of the congregation speaking in tongues and just going absolutely wild during the services. Our houses were surrounded by fields, and my sister and I loved playing outside with our puppy Chip. The fields were filled with tall grasses and ticks. Most days, after my sister and I finished playing, my dad would light a cigarette on the back porch and check us for ticks, removing them by putting the tip of his cigarette on the tick's back, which would make them recoil and release from our skin. However, my dad wasn't the most attentive parent, so sometimes he would forget to do this. One day, when my dad was checking me, he found a really big tick attached to my head, which means it must have been there for at least a few days. The next day, I got really sick. I couldn't keep anything down and had a fever of 103 degrees Fahrenheit. After a few days, my dad brought me to the local ER. The doctor examined me and determined me that I had some kind of fever. They told my dad there wasn't much they could do, so they gave him the option to either keep me in the hospital or to bring me back home and make me comfortable. My dad chose to bring me back home. A few days later, he drove me to a different hospital a little further away, and they told him a similar thing. I can't remember much from this time except feeling like the world around me was fuzzy, almost like I was in a waking dream. I also remember sleeping nonstop and being carried back and forth to the bathroom because I was so weak that I couldn't walk or even sit up in bed. I remember my dad crying and seeming really scared, acting like he thought I was going to die. After over a week of this illness, 9 days, I think, Dave asked my dad if he and his congregation could pray for me. My dad said yes, but he was hesitant because Dave said he, my uncle, and my sister couldn't take part in the service with him and the congregation. Instead, he was to hand me over and wait outside, or in our apartment, until they finished. My dad, feeling out of options, agreed. My dad carried me over to Dave's church, another renovated barn but remodeled into a chapel, which was only a 2-minute walk from our place. It was raining so hard that we were soaking wet upon arrival. My dad reluctantly handed me over to Dave, who instructed him to come back in a couple of hours. Then he carried me into the main church room with all the members of his congregation. I remember him placing me in the middle of the room, in a large beanbag chair. I remember his congregation formed a circle around me, but I can't remember anything else after that, until the very end of the service. Dave and his people did their thing and 2 hours passed, and when everything was over, I was completely better. My memories of being carried over there and placed in the room are super hazy and dreamlike, but the memory of waking up and feeling completely better are so vivid. Almost like the beginning memories are a dream, but the end memories are real. At the end of the service, I stood up and walked out of the room after not being able to for over a week. I felt hungry and energized. I felt like I had just woken up from a long, restful sleep, but I'm uncertain if I was awake or asleep during the prayer. Years later, my dad told me that something else happened during those 2 hours. He said that he was waiting outside when he heard a loud crash that sounded like thunder, and the whole building lost power and went dark. He ran to the window to look outside and saw a flicker of bright light that lit up the entire sky. At that moment, the rain completely stopped, and the sky stayed lit up with a blinding bright light for a while, much longer than a normal lightning flash. My dad said that while the sky was lit up, he started feeling really dizzy and had to sit down with his back against the wall, because he felt that he was going to pass out. When he looked back up, the bright light outside was gone and the power had come back on. Then he heard the familiar rhythmic hum of Dave and the congregation speaking again, with some yelling hallelujah, and others speaking in tongues. The sound of maracas, tambourines, and drums filled his ears. Shortly after, Dave came out and opened the door, and his face was a bright red, as if he had just run a marathon, and he had sweat pouring down his face. All he said was, "Praise the Lord." My dad was so happy to see me up and walking that he thanked Dave over and over. My dad had always remained skeptical about that night and shrugged off the bright light, as his mind playing tricks on him due to the stress of the situation. But sometimes, after he'd been drinking, he would mention that moment with a curious look in his eyes, wondering if we had somehow crossed into a different reality, a glitch in the Matrix. How else could he explain my sudden recovery and his bizarre experience? I've always questioned that night all my life. Did the end of my illness just happen to coincide with the timing of the prayer events? Just a super convenient and unlikely coincidence? Or did something truly miraculous and unexplainable occur? Would I have died if they hadn't prayed over me that night? Why did Dave make my family wait outside? Did he really believe there was a demon in my dad's soul? What did they do in that room, and how was I completely better afterwards? Did it have anything to do with the lightning, the loss of power and bright light in the sky, or was all that just another coincidence? I guess I will never have these answers, but the memory of that day with all of its strange occurrences lingers in the back of my mind. Hi, this happened to me in the late 90s, and I guess it would be considered as paranormal. Hey there. I don't want to include my name, because I don't want this story tied to me, and if you decide to narrate the story, I've changed a few things, just in case my brother or other family members hear about this. That way they won't know it's about my niece that passed away. Years ago, I got a summer job working in Minnesota as a canoe guide. During that time, my brother's wife was pregnant, and I knew that I would probably become an uncle while I was on the trail. For a few months prior, I kept having a weird dream of being in the woods and hearing a baby cry. As I followed the sound, I would get out to a clearing. A baby was on the ground and crying. As I would approach the baby to pick it up, a wolf would appear from behind the baby, and then the wolf would pick up the baby and carry it away a bit further, and sit down with it between his paws. If I approached again, he would pick up the baby once more and disappear into the woods. Anyways, I would dismiss this dream and thought nothing of it, at least at the time. One time, I got a group of American Boy Scouts for an 8.5-hour day trip. I loved the longer trips, as it would allow us to go to more remote locations further away from civilization. Some of the routes we had, we would go 2 or 3 days without seeing any other groups or fishermen. During that trip, one of the younger scout leaders' tents broke. Since he was in his early 20s, I let him stay in my tent. I was 18 at the time, and the other scout leaders were 40 years or older. He was too old to sleep in the kids' tents, as they were all 13 to 15 years old. On day 6 of our trip, I woke up, and the youngest scout leader said that I talked in my sleep. He said that around 1 a.m., I started to say, "Get off of me, you're too heavy, I can't breathe." And then all of a sudden, I sat up in the tent and yelled out, "No!" at the top of my lungs, and then fell back asleep. All I remember was the dream with the wolf and the baby, but had no recollection of any other dream or screaming. Again, I dismissed it and didn't think anything of it. I was more embarrassed than anything else. When I got back to camp, I got to a payphone as soon as I had the chance. My father answered, and I asked if the baby had arrived yet, and if I was an uncle to a boy or a girl. My father then broke down in tears. He told me that the baby was born, and that it had died 3 days ago. As I hung up, one of the scout leaders was passing by and saw me and asked if I was an uncle yet. I just answered, for a few days, and then broke down in tears and walked off to a point near the lake to be alone. I guess the news spread pretty quickly. My boss came and found me, we talked for a bit, and offered me 4 days off with pay. When I got back to the main lodge, the staff and guests had pooled some money to buy a round bus ticket to go back home. After a 15-hour ride in the bus to get back home, my parents informed me of the reason that the baby had died. The mother had breastfed the baby at night, as the baby had milk in its mouth and stomach. The coroner thinks that the mother had fallen asleep and suffocated the baby under her own weight. She didn't realize what she had done and put the baby back in the crib at some point. When my brother came back home from work, he picked up the baby and realized that he was dead. To this day, my brother never talks about his child's death. The baby's death was put at around 2 a.m. That's when it hit me. The night that I talked in my dream and screamed no was the same night my nephew had passed away. And considering I was in another time zone, I yelled no at 1 a.m. where I was, but it was 2 a.m. back home. When I showed up at the wake, my heart stopped when I looked at the picture. When the child was born, my brother had removed his shirt and put his child on top of the shirt, then took a picture. The black shirt had a wolf on it, and it looked like the wolf was standing guard over the baby. Hey Raven, a long-time listener and probably 5th or 6th time submitter. Lots of weird stuff happens to me. I have no idea what to call this or how you'll categorize it if you feature it, but I feel like my whole life I've carried this magnetic energy that attracts the strangest of coincidences. Sometimes they're so weird that I feel like I'm living in a TV show or a simulation event. So maybe this is a Matrix event. A very silly one, though. And the other day, a friend and I were on our way to go look at some houses for rent. For some context as to what follows, I work at a luxury car dealership as a service advisor. I make commissions on car repairs. I have contacts with a lot of other dealerships in the area who text or call me directly when they have a used car that is one of my own dealership's brands if they need it to be inspected and or repaired. I had recently gotten several cars from the Mercedes-Benz dealership, and my friend and I drove past that dealership, and I'm kind of goofy, so I finger-gunned the dealership and said, "Thanks for the money." Literally the exact moment that I did that, my contact from Mercedes texted me to tell me they'd be sending another car when I returned to work the following day. We were both like, whoa, that was pretty weird. And we didn't think too much of it. Since we were then on the topic of cars, my friend mentioned she recently heard a funny song about Subarus. As she was playing the song for me, we both decided that we were hungry. At the very last minute, we crossed 3 lanes of traffic to pull into a Wawa. For those of you who don't know, it's a gas station restaurant hybrid that actually has real food that we happened to be passing. As we were pulling into the Wawa parking lot, still playing this dumb Subaru song, we saw a Subaru WRX parked at one of the pumps. We giggled about it for a second, but it's not uncommon to see a Subaru, so whatever, right? But as we started to drive past the WRX in order to reach the parking area, my former coworker, who I hadn't seen in the months since he left, stepped out of the car, wearing none other than a Subaru shirt. we were absolutely stunned, and we were laughing our back ends off at the same time. I know this is a very goofy story, but maybe it's a nice lighthearted change of pace among all the spooky ones. Maybe you won't share it on your channel, I am, but I hope that you at least enjoyed reading it. Thanks, Raven. This is a story that I haven't told many people, but I have told the public once before. Though this is the first time I'm putting this story in full detail since. This happened in my second house that I have ever lived in. Just for a few details, this house is pretty old. All my family that has lived there says that they've heard doors closing and footsteps upstairs, even though they were home alone. I've seen people outside our house many times, even though they are not truly there. I have a lot of hallucinations, so this could be one, but I'm honestly not convinced this was a hallucination. I was 9 years old at the time and was in my room. My room is on the top floor of the house. I had nightlights in almost every corner of my room. There was a door at the end of my room where you can stand on a balcony. There are 2 huge windows behind my bed, and another long window aside from it. Anyway, I was on my bed, drawing. It was really late, probably 2 or 3 in the morning late. The stairs to go up to my room and my twin brother's rooms are extremely squeaky. Same thing with the hallway. I assume you would know why I'm mentioning this, because I heard heavy footsteps coming up the stairs. I was scared that I would get yelled at or punished for being up this late, since my parents were strict about how late me and my twin brother were up. I swiftly hid my sketchbook under my blanket and my pencil under my pillow. I would say, if I'm being serious about it, that I can pretend I'm sleeping pretty well. I did just that, and pretended to be sleeping. The footsteps went from the stairs to the hallway and then came into my room. I got so curious on who it was, so I very carefully opened my eyes slightly, and I saw a figure. They, or whatever the hell it looked like the figure of my mother, father, or older sister. Possibly my older brother, but I don't think so. I was truly horrified and tried to continue my act. They continued to walk around my room, and then finally stood in front of my dresser and stared at the mirror on my dresser. Or I assume they did. I couldn't see them anymore since they were behind me, and I didn't want to turn around since they would know I'm not asleep. I started hearing the sound of drawers opening. They were probably looking for something, but I still don't know what they were looking for. Finally, after probably 5 long minutes, they left. I wanted to cry, and I'm not sure why. I did eventually fall asleep, and in the morning I talked to my family at breakfast and continued to question everyone if they had gone upstairs. Everyone denied. I even asked my twin brother, even though there was no way it was him, and he also denied, since he was asleep downstairs that night. Sometimes, when I bring up the story, people call me stupid and that I should have yelled as loud as I could, but I'm not sure. I'm still currently living in this house, and I have had some paranormal experiences, but this one honestly still scares me. And I think it's because I never heard them leave the hallway. When I was about 4 or 5 years old, I had a peculiar experience that has stayed with me to this day. Like many children, I was fascinated by the idea that special powers existed, probably influenced by the cartoons I watched on Cartoon Network, to be honest. So, one day, I got it into my head that if I concentrated hard enough, I might be able to influence matter with my mind. My target was the plastic bed of my toy truck that I owned. I don't know why I chose it, but I was determined to try and break through the plastic using nothing but the focus of my thoughts. I remember sitting there, my little hands growing sweaty with effort as I focused all my mental energy on that single spot. Of course, nothing happened. Disappointed, I eventually gave up and went on about my day. The incident slipped from my mind as I moved on to other childish pursuits. The truly strange part came the next morning. When I woke up and went to play with my toys, I was shocked to find a small hole in the exact spot on the truck bed where I had been concentrating my efforts the day before. Confused and a little scared, I ran to my grandmother to ask if she had heard anything break during the night. To my surprise, she said yes, she had heard something. My parents, naturally, were skeptical. They assumed the hole had always been there, and I simply hadn't noticed it before. But I knew differently. Or, at least, I thought I did. To this day, I'm not really sure what exactly happened. Was it a genuine paranormal event? A strange coincidence? Or simply a false memory created by an imaginative child's mind? I've tried to recreate the effect since then, but never with any success. This experience, as inexplicable as it is, has always made me wonder about the hidden potentials of the human mind, and the nature of reality itself. While I don't claim to have psychic powers, this childhood memory is a reminder that there's still so much about our world that we don't understand. I still have no clue what that was, so let's end here. So that, my friends, was a collection of some unexplained stories. I know the thumbnail says creepy unexplained stories, but these were just, in my opinion, unexplained stories. I go with creepy because that's kind of what the channel's known for, plus some of these stories were creepy. Some of them were just bizarre stories. Just straight up unexplained. And I'm here for it, so. Hopefully, you are also here for it. If you're not, then you're not hearing this because you're not here. So, hi, I guess. Hello for those of you who are here. And if you're not, I'm sorry. If you are, I'm sorry as well, but for different reasons. Anyways, hopefully you all enjoyed these stories. If you did, please do consider hitting that like button on the video, as that does help the video do better. If you are new to the channel and enjoyed what you heard, consider hitting that subscribe button and the bell icon next to it. And if you're feeling ever so bold, consider sending me some crab rangoon. Or leaving me a comment below the video. That is also acceptable. I allow that as well. So, you can also join Patreon memberships to get early access to content like this. And do a super thanks, which is a tip to the channel. Submit your stories at astheravendreams.com, or listen to the podcast here on YouTube or on Spotify, Apple, Audible, Pandora, if anyone's still on Pandora. I miss the old Pandora. Pandora that used to shuffle music really well. It doesn't do it so well anymore. I don't know what they did, but anyways. Everywhere. Places. Stuff. I also do have a merch store down below. You can get the link. It's in the description. I believe it's just marked as Raven's merch store or something like that. It is a T-Chip store. T-Chip is a good platform. They are print on demand, and I like them. That's about all. I'm just kind of rambling here. Again, hopefully you guys enjoyed the stories. Hopefully I see you again here very soon. But until then, remember that you are loved, you are valid, you are important, you are the best you that you can be. Do not forget it, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And until next time, my friends, much love, and sleep well.